there was always this drive, this want, not a selfish want, not a just going after riches and wealth and material things, but there was a yearning for more.
All right, everybody, welcome back to The Six. My name is Sandy Cerami. We are at Bakari Grill once again. The place is hopping. Our hosts, John, Lisa, and Alexa Amaratis, doing the job as usual. Got my man Barney and my man Matt keeping us well hydrated. The man making the magic happen behind the lens, the one and only Hollywood Capone of Capone Studios. And we are waiting on Double D, Deshaun Drummond, the man behind the brand. But the man to my right is the guy I want to talk about today. A friend of mine, a guy that I admire a great deal. I'm thrilled that you said yes to come on to the show. And his name is Mr. Michael Maron. He is the CEO of Holy Name Medical Center. And I'm excited to share some thoughts today with Mike and hear his insight with respect to leadership, leading the way in terms of medical care, innovation in medical care, end-of-life care, things that are on the minds of people out there in the world today, because healthcare has taken some huge turns over the course of the last few years. We can talk about everything from a visit to your local doctor to things as big as Obamacare. Right. It all impacts each and every one of us. So welcome to the show, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sandy. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming. We have a history together.
We do.
We go back because we were both students at Bergen Catholic High School. I went there a couple of years after you, and I'll remind you of that every time we get together. But you're one of the guys who paved the way for guys like me. Talk a little bit about what it was like for you growing up. Where'd you grow up?
I actually grew up here in Bergen County, born at Holy Name Medical Center of all places.
Amazing, right?
Lived most of my life in Oradell. Live there now. So I ended up returning and live right around the corner from the house I grew up in. If you'd asked me 20, 40, 50 years ago, more than that now, because I've been there a long time.
Keep counting.
Yeah,
right?
keep
counting, baby.
I probably would have been the least likely, so life takes odd turns, and here I am back living right where I grew up and running the hospital that I was born in.
Well, it's funny. You shared with me off camera before we started rolling about the fact that you've got a new neighbor right now, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Who is that?
So that would be my oldest son, Mike, just bought a home 2 doors down from me.
A little bit of a surprise for you.
A little bit. No, we kind of knew he was looking around, but the fact that this opportunity, again, sort of an alignment of the stars, that he starts looking for a home, and he searched all over Bergen County. It wasn't like that was it, one and done. And after looking at about 20 different houses, settled and said, you know what, this is a great opportunity. It's right here. It's a good value, and I really want to live on the street.
It's funny, history tends to repeat itself. And so his kids will now have an opportunity, ultimately, as you would suspect, to share some of the experiences that you shared with your son now.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in Oradell.
So growing up,
great town.
Yeah, it was a great town. I'm the second oldest of 6 children.
Wow. Okay.
So there was 3 boys and 3 girls in my family. My older brother Ed was just a year older than me, and then my younger brother Gerard was 10 years younger than me. All products of Bergen Catholic and Providence College.
Our alma mater. We love you guys.
Alma mater, love Bergen. Big factor in all our lives. My younger brother Gerard, also talking about who lives here, he lives 4 more doors down on the same street as me and my son.
Property values skyrocketing, I think, with every new
or plummeting, depending on which side you want to look at that. So, but strong family values, strong family ties. My 3 sisters, 2 went to IHA, 1 to Holy Angels. My youngest sister, Judine, who graduated Holy Angels, passed away at the Villa Marie Claire 5 years ago. Metastatic melanoma, a condition we see all too much of these days.
Yeah, no doubt.
And but she was an angel, and funny story about her, give you an insight to how we grew up. When we were real young, we were kind of like the Bowery Boys. So those who go all the way back.
One of my favorite shows,
right?
Sunday mornings.
Right? Sunday
Channel
mornings,
11.
right?
Yes.
Or the Little Rascals, if you want to use them as an example. And so we had, we were all of 5, 6 years old, and we had street gangs, or what we thought were street gangs. And my mother gets pregnant, and now there's 2 boys and 2 girls.
Okay.
And the unanimous consent of all the guys in the neighborhood was this has to be a boy. And
To add to the ranks.
has to be a boy. And we thought this was funny. And my mother at the time had a devotion for St. Jude. So she decided that if it was a boy, she's going to name the boy Jude. And all of us in the neighborhood, not just me and my older brother, but all the kids in the neighborhood, horrified that my mother,
big thumbs
you
down.
cannot name a boy in this neighborhood Jude. He'll be beaten up every day.
There's only one name worse than that, by the way, for a boy. Sandy. And we've talked about that on the 6.
So, lo and behold, my mother gives birth to my youngest sister, and she decides to create a name because Jude wasn't going to go, so she created the name Judine.
I love it.
And so Judine was my mother's sort of twist on St. Jude, and named my sister Judine. Well, you would have it known that none of the guys in the neighborhood were taking that, right? It's unacceptable. This was supposed to be a boy, and we don't care if you call her Judine.
Oh, this poor kid.
We got our own name. We're calling her Butch.
Come on.
Because anybody who's born in this neighborhood should be a guy, and the name should have been Butch, a man's name. So here you have this China doll of a girl who lived till 46, and right up to the day she died, everybody who knew her called her Butch.
That is classic.
Called her Butch.
That is classic. But see, those are the stories I think that make Oradell what it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I spent some time in Oradell. They ushered me out of town quickly. It was in the middle of the night. No, kidding. But I know the Enclave really, really well. Talk to me about what your parents were like. What kind of an influence they had on you growing up?
So my parents were simple people, very into the church early on. Didn't have a lot of wealth, not real successful. My father was a product of the Depression and World War II. And so he was a civil engineer, worked most of his life at Lummus, but really didn't find any professional satisfaction in that. 45 years ago, he was one of the first people ordained into the church as a deacon.
Wow.
And that really became his life. That was what he lived for.
So he did find success. It just wasn't in business.
It just wasn't in business, right. And so he was a strong believer in the church. We used to lock horns a lot over different aspects of that, especially him and my older brother Ed. But that was so we grew up in a very religious household. My father. Most people think Maron is Irish. It's not. It's actually Italian. He is.
He dropped the vowel.
He is 100% Italian. In fact, he couldn't even speak English until he was 12 years old.
Holy cow! So I gotta admit to something right now because we're authentic on the 6. I always thought you were Irish.
Yeah.
Always thought you, Michael, Gerard. I'm saying that Judine. There's got to be Irish. But it's Italian.
Well, my mother is.
I like even more now.
See?
All right. There you go.
So I am actually half Italian and half Irish. My mother's a Murphy, and so I am.
That's the twinkling blue eyes.
That's
right
the blue
there.
eyes.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
That's a great combination. Talk to me about your mom.
So my mom still around. We lost my father a couple of years ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
That's okay. It was a good life. He was 90 years old.
Wow, God bless him.
And went the way he should go. Right. It's a way actually all of us should go. Got a call from my younger brother and my nephew. They were at the house and they said, "Dad's not feeling good. Could you come over and just take a look?" So I moved my parents back into the neighborhood, bought another home just around the corner. Nice ranch, easy for them. The plan was long life, retire. My father comes from genes with longevity in them. My cousin, who lived in Leonia, that we were very, very close to, Jerry Ciancia, was 10 years older than my father. Okay. And they were born on the same day, St. Joseph's Day, March 19th. And so we had this connection. And Jerry was on the board at Holy Name for many, many years. So he and I had this tight bond. So I go over to my father's house and I said, "Pop, what's going on?" And he says, "Well, I feel a little cold sweats and this and that." Called one of my docs. I said, "What do you think?" And they're like, "You know what, Mike? He's 90. Why don't you bring him down to the hospital? Let's check him out." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Dad, you think you can walk to the car?" He said, "Sure." So I walk him to the car. My mother's nervous, and he's like, "Don't worry, Mike will take me down to the ER. They'll check me out. I'll be back in a little while. Don't worry about it." So I put him in the car, leave, start to drive from Oradell to Teaneck, and on the way down, he starts going out on me.
Come on.
And I'm like, Pop, I'm touching his leg. I said, Pop, you got to stay with me here. Don't go. He goes, and at one point he snaps out and looks at me and goes, what are you worried about? I got another 10 years. His cousin,
a man of faith.
His cousin Jerry was just about to turn 100. He's like, I got another 10 years at least.
Wow, that's perspective.
What are you worried about, right? 5 minutes later, as I turned the road into the hospital, he was gone.
Holy cow.
So we unloaded him quickly, brought him in. They worked on him for about 20, 30 minutes, tried to resuscitate him, nothing. That was it.
Wow. So no pain, just
no pain,
went
fast,
his own way.
quick, easy, right. Just
I lost my
literally
dad
drifted
similarly. I mean, it was a little different story, but it was no pain,
Yeah.
gone instantly. I mean, he knew how to make an exit. Pat Cerami, you knew how to make an exit. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But, again, I think a man of faith, obviously,
Yeah.
he gets in the car, says, Michael's going to make sure everything's okay.
Everything okay.
And in a way, it was all okay.
Yeah.
Went his own way.
Yeah, that's it.
Let's fast forward a little bit.
Yep.
Growing up in Oradell, Bergen Catholic had to be on the radar,
Big.
early on.
Yep.
Talk about your first year in Bergen and what it was like for your 4 years there.
So Bergen, big part of my life. Early on, I was always into sports. Played pretty much every sport under the sun. The only one I never really played competitively at Bergen or even pre-Bergen was football.
Okay.
But I was a track runner. I was a soccer player. I was a
Okay.
basketball player. I was a hockey player. And so did it all. And went to Bergen and decided, ran track for a little bit. But Brother Klein, back then, used to actually have a stopwatch on me walking through the halls, and Brother Klein and I had a little bit of a rub-in. And so I walked away from...
That happened once in a while back then.
I walked away from track. Because I was a sprinter and he wanted me, really working on that, thought I could compete. I was too stubborn to listen.
Isn't it amazing that what others see in us that we don't tend to see in ourselves?
Exactly.
It's so important to listen to some outside
always.
input,
Well, when you're a freshman in high school, you
know better than everybody else.
You know better than everybody else, and you're not, and especially back then. Hopefully today kids are a little more tuned in, but listening to that advice wasn't top on my priority, right?
It's funny you say that because we're both fathers, and having those conversations with your kids very often they can't. The perspective for them is that we were never the same age as they were.
That's right.
So a lesson for the younger listeners and viewers out there, that when you have somebody that's got more relative experience, it doesn't hurt to just listen.
That's right.
Right? Just lend an ear.
Right.
So,
well, and I think also in hindsight, now that we're on the other side of that equation and we're the older ones looking down, we have to be a little bit more tolerant of them too, as to
Absolutely.
Are they tuning in and how do we connect with them, right? So we have the wealth of experience and knowledge. It's important for us to be, and not so sure everybody back when we were younger had that sensitivity to
no question.
they're younger.
No
right?
question.
It was there, but not.
It's all relative, right?
It's all
and
relative.
you think about. When you look at the dichotomy of social media, it's a great tool to use to cut through the clutter, and then sometimes it's actually the clutter.
Yeah.
And so to your point, we have to figure out how to communicate more effectively.
That's right.
With the younger folks out there. It's a great point.
What I found when I went to Bergen, there's a lot of great guys, friends that I'm still close with today. That and even guys that maybe back in my 4 years at Bergen I wasn't as close with. We end up becoming real tight. John and I talk about this all the time. John Amaratis from here. We went to Bergen together. We knew each other in Bergen, but we really didn't hang out.
Right.
It was years later we came back, and I would list John amongst one of my best friends right now. Right? He's a great guy.
No
He's
question.
got the right values, hardworking, all the things that you want to see people exemplify for how we're supposed to conduct our lives. He absolutely exemplifies that. And
I think both he and I would say the same thing about you. And it's funny because when you're that age in high school, there's a lot of posturing and fronting that's going on.
That's right.
And as we get older and we realize that everybody's just a human being doing the best that they possibly can, that's
right.
when some of the greatest relationships tend to blossom and form.
That's right.
And I think that's a great example of it.
Right.
Give me one really funny memory from Bergen Catholic, one that you look back on and you say, this one, was a side splitter for me.
Oh, well, there was a lot of them. I think the one was actually when we were seniors in high school, and back then the big rivalry wasn't Bergen-Bosco, it was Bergen-Joe's.
Bergen-St. Joe's, sure enough.
And we ended up going to a Bergen-St. Joe's basketball game that had a bleacher clearing brawl at the end of the game.
Not uncommon.
And that led into a series of other events that same year where Billy Wetzelberger, who is a big football player, great guy, military guy now.
Bobby.
Yeah, so Billy and a bunch of us decided that we were going to go knock on the door of Waxy Granitel from Bosco because he had called out Wetzelberger sometime. And I remember driving up to this. Now, remember, I came from simple means, and this is one of the true values of Bergen, is you had a lot of guys who lived on the socioeconomic spectrum where I came from.
Absolutely.
And you had people who came from Franklin Lakes, and it was like a whole nother world.
Yeah.
And we drove up to this big house in Franklin Lakes and got out of our cars and had the audacity to go up to the door and knocking on the door, calling out Waxy Granitel to come out. And I remember driving away saying, what were we
Gutsy for a lot of reasons, my friend. I'll tell you that.
What were we thinking? Right? Nothing happened. It all just kind of diffused. It was like, what were we thinking? And I look back at that and say, if someone did that to my house today, how would you respond? What would you do? Right?
No doubt.
I mean, we did some crazy things.
Well, I think there's something really exciting and unique about that Bergen-Joe's, Bergen-Bosco rivalry. As a matter of fact, last night, I'm sad to tell you that, and this is no longer evergreen because I'm referencing something from last night, but Bergen and Bosco in the baseball game last night we were playing for the league title. Granitel, who was a key player for Bosco last night. Yeah, so history tends to repeat itself, not just at Bergen, but also at Bosco. And they're both two great schools. I mean, we talk about that all the time.
Great schools.
Joe's as well. And we're going to talk more about the Catholic influence, not just in the schools, but also in your life professionally in the next segment. But how about after Bergen Catholic? Where'd you end up at college?
So I ended up at Providence College, not because I was some devout student and had a great track in mind. Back then, like most of my early life, I had an older brother who was very, very close to. He was only a year older than me. And he went to Bergen, and he went to Providence. And so I graduated from Bergen, and I said, I applied to one college.
Come
so
on.
I tell you, compared to what goes on today, one college. And it was Providence College. That was it.
Okay.
Thank God I got in.
No question.
I did not get the scholarship that my brother got because they wouldn't give it to the same family 2 years in a row.
Okay.
So I ended up having to work and pay my way through college because my father didn't have the means to do that. My brother, fortunately, had a full ride to Providence, and so I followed him to Providence College.
What did you do to work?
Well, early on, so in my family, from the time I was 13, back then when you could get work papers.
Working papers,
right?
absolutely.
So minute day I turned 13, I was off getting my working papers. Pre-13, I was a paper carrier for the Record. Which the Borgs have become, the whole Borg family have become very good friends of mine.
Yep.
Mac laughs hysterically when he realizes that my first real job was delivering his
Working
newspaper.
for him, yeah, absolutely.
Right? I worked for him. So he takes great credit in that.
That was good money if you had the right route back then.
It was good money. And we used to get up and ride our bicycles with the big baskets on the back and a 100 paper house route and had to go collect the money and the whole 9 yards. From there, I became a bagger at ShopRite in New Milford.
I know it well.
And I was quickly elevated to the assistant manager of the Haba aisle. And Larry and Sarah, who is now also a good friend, laughs when I tell this story.
Great guy. Larry is a great guy.
I worked for his dad at the ShopRite in New Milford. Haba is the health and beauty aid. So I went from actually bagging groceries to stocking all the shampoos and beauty items that are in that aisle, working with a guy, Murray Tackle.
Well, it's quasi first foray into health.
That was
obviously.
Yep. And so then from there, I became a house painter. You could make a lot of money painting houses.
No doubt.
So when I was in high school, my brother became a landscaper, worked for a local landscaping company. So I decided I wasn't going to do that. We had a little diversity. I became a house painter.
Okay.
And then when I was in college, took to house painting and actually had my own company. So
Talk a little bit about that. Like, what was it that inspired you to start your own company? Did you see somebody else out there that had been successful? And
yeah, well, I worked for a couple of guys, and when I was all through high school and my first year at college, and I realized these guys are having me go out on the job,
right?
Basically act as the foreman, start the job, close the job, deal with the customers. The only thing I wasn't doing was doing the billing and collecting the full fee for the service, but I knew what they were because my bosses back then, there were two different guys, would confer with me as to, we're going to take on this house, look at it, what do you think, how long is it going to take you, what would you bid on it? So I knew all the ins and outs of the business. I said, well, why am I doing this for them? I'll do it for myself.
I love it, and I don't want that lesson to be lost on our audience, because it's something that we talk about all the time, taking a shot and going for it, and having some confidence in yourself that even if you don't know it all, you'll figure it out as you go. You know enough to figure out the next steps in the process. Talk a little bit about what that business was like. You made some money. Actually made good money.
Okay. For back then, it's what paid my way through college.
Amazing, right?
Yeah, so I could work the 3 months, 4 months out of the summer, and then part-time in the season, but even in the winter I would paint indoors. So I could get jobs everywhere. Most of my accounts came by word of mouth, so very important to me to make sure clean, neat, do the job well, price it fairly, treat the customers with respect, and word spread. And I had a lot of work. I had to turn jobs down.
How did you find the people to do the actual physical painting and the work?
Most of it I did myself.
Okay.
And then there were a couple of guys who would moonlight with me when I had some of the bigger jobs. But believe it or not, 90% of it I did solo.
Wow.
So I was able to work on my own, moving ladders, walking scaffolding. I did high jobs. I had no fear of heights.
Okay.
But I was able to do most of it by myself.
I think a great preparatory path for you for later on in life. Figuring stuff out and not worrying about whether or not you had the helping hand.
That's right.
You just went and got the job done.
Right. You had to take responsibility early on, right? So that was always that work ethic. That if you want something in life, you're going to have to work for it. We were talking about Bergen. I can tell you another funny story. When we were seniors, a bunch of us back then, right? Just to remind everybody, back then the drinking age was 18, and it was not quite the same as it is today. But we were able to go and buy a few cases of beer, and we hopped the fence one nice warm night of the Westwood Swim Club.
I know it well.
And so we're sitting on this...
not too far from here, by the way, right around the corner.
And we're sitting on the expansive lawn of the Westwood Swim Club in the lounge chairs, having our own private party, drinking our beer. And I remember with some of my good friends reminiscing and saying, you know what, someday this could be my backyard. Right? Now, I came from nothing close to that, and I'm like, someday this could be, right? You never know what could be possible. But if you want it, you have to work.
Gotta go get it.
Right? And I think one of the things back then, for me personally, that was a big driver, was there was always this drive, this want. Not a selfish want, not a just going after riches and wealth and material things, but there was a yearning for more, right? And it drove me a lot in everything that I did.
You're a very mission-based person. I've noticed that about you since the first time we had a chance to meet, and I think that's really what drives you, is more the mission than the material things.
That's correct. That's correct.
And that's noble. I love it.
Early on, started to question things, and we can touch on that in a little bit as to why you're here, right? Life is short.
The eternal burning question for every one of us.
What's our purpose, right? And why are we here? What's our destiny? Are we supposed to fulfill? And we have to find that. And if you find it and you think you're in niche with it, and then everything's going to align, right? And not always the way you want, but if you're open to that concept, I think that's where true success comes from.
No question, no question. I can't remember who had the quote, but they said, the two greatest days in your life are the day that you're born and the day you figure out why.
That's right. Exactly right.
It's amazing, because I think when you get to the point in your life when you start to ponder that big question is when things start to become a little bit clearer for you, and you create a vision and a path for what you want to do later on in your life. As we close out this segment over here, let's push forward a little bit. You met a wonderful girl at some point by the name of Diane. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like meeting Diane for the first time? And
Sure.
Did you know?
I didn't really know at the time. So followed my brother to Providence College.
Right.
Freshman year. Back then, Providence College, most of the girls wore very pink and yellow and bright sweaters with the monogram across the collar, just underneath their chin. Very common dress code. Except this one girl walks into a dorm room my freshman year wearing tight jeans, long blonde hair down to her rear end, and a cowboy hat. And I'm like, she doesn't really conform to this
One
Providence.
of these girls is not like the
others. Exactly. And that struck me. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to start seeing, a little bit more. We started dating our sophomore year. So we've been together now. That's going back a long time, that's actually over 40 years.
Wow, it's not the norm today, as you know that.
Not the norm.
There's so much going on in the world today, and we talk about couples that have been together for a long time. I love when I see the two of you here because we bump into each other here very often. I just celebrated 20 years with Mary this past week, and I look at my in-laws. My in-laws just passed away a couple weeks ago. Within 4 days of each other.
Wow.
And they are the greatest examples for us because after 58 years together, they left the earth together. Which was a true love story.
Nice.
But I see you and Diane here often together, just the two of you.
Right.
And that speaks to the type of relationship that you guys have. Talk a little bit about the kids.
So, Diane and I end up graduating from Providence together. She was a photographer by training.
Okay.
Right? So I was I started out, actually, and we'll get into this in the next segment, wanting to be a physician. My brother was a pre-med major.
Okay.
So back then, everything I did, you're doing it, I do it. I just followed. And so I thought I was going to do pre-med, and he talked me out of it. He said...
Really?
Yeah. Basically said, did you think about this? It's 4 years of school, and he was starting organic chem his sophomore year, and he said, it's hard. You're going to actually have to work. You're not going to be able to skate through this, because up to that point, I never really applied myself.
Right.
And he said, and then you got 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, maybe 2 years of fellowship. It's a long
You got to really want it.
It's a commitment, right? Did you think about it? And I sat back, I said, no, I was just doing what you were doing. I gave it no thought. I mean, you're talking to the guy who applied to one college, didn't give this any thought. I'm following you. No. And so I said, wow, I'm not doing this. And I changed. And I changed to accounting.
Wow. Thank God for that.
Thank God for. Well, here's another divine intervention we talk about. And this, both Bergen and Providence had a big role. For reasons to this day, I will never know why. My sophomore year, a counselor at Providence College calls me into the office. I didn't do it. I'm like, what did I do wrong? He says, I was looking at your transcript. I noticed you went from pre-med to accounting. Why'd you do that? I told him the story of my brother. And he said, well, did you ever think about running a hospital? I said, had no idea that even existed. He says, it does. He goes, it's actually a great career. And we actually have a major that will set you on that path. And he said, and I don't think you're working hard enough in accounting, so I signed you up to double major in accounting and health services administration.
That's true divine intervention.
True divine intervention.
No question.
He knew I was sort of this aimless young man, and he signed me up. And I said, okay. And I didn't fight back. I said, fine, we'll do it.
Meant to be.
Meant to be.
Meant to be. And I think a lot of times in people's lives, if you're paying attention to the signs that are being put in front of you, you make smarter decisions, and better things have yet to come in your life. You don't know what they are, but they reveal themselves as you continue down that path. We're going to wrap this segment over here, but I want to go back to Diane and the boys a little bit just before we move on. We're going to wrap here part one with Mr. Mike Maron, CEO of Holy Name Hospital, Holy Name Medical Center. Pardon me.
They're interchangeable.
They are. We are here at Bakari Grill in Washington Township. We'll be back in just a bit on the 6.